From the center of the universe, now in its 7th season covering your 19-time Grey Cup champion Toronto Argonauts, it's the Xs and Argos Podcast with Argos color analyst Ben Grant and Coach JB.
Welcome to the Xs and Argos bi-week podcast brought to you by Something in the Water Brewing. My name is Ben Grant, joined as always by JB. It is our second last podcast of 2025. Here is what's on the docket for today. We've got the Argo nominees for CFL awards. They were just announced today. We also heard from Ryan Dinwiddie, Pinball, Clemons, and others at the end of season media availability. We'll go through what they said and what we can kind of read into that. Plus, JB and I are going to go through the 3 highs and the 3 lows of this 2025 season. There were more lows than highs to choose from, but the highs were pretty good as well. And of course, we'll have Put Me Down for 20, our last week of the season on that, and our last week of Challenge Flag. All that and more coming up on this episode of the Xs and Argos Podcast. JB, it's always a great time to go down to Something in the Water Brewing just because the season is done, just because there are no more practices at Lamport Stadium, games at BMO Field, doesn't mean you can't find great beer at Something in the Water. They've got you covered all year long, whether it's Ghost Taco, you go in to grab a bite to eat the best tacos in the city, or it's the many award-winning beer they've got at Something in the Water Brewing, or if you want to try Longbow, because you haven't yet, the beer that was made for you, fans of the Double Blue, or one of their seasonal specials. Drink curious is what they say. That's their motto. There's always something to intrigue you at Something in the Water Brewing. You got to make sure you get down there in Liberty Village. Try them out. You won't regret it. JB, let's get into this thing. Let's start off with, and actually maybe just before we get into the award nominees for this year, just a programming note, because I have had a lot of questions. This is unfamiliar territory for a lot of our listeners. They're like, what happens now with the podcast? So we've got today's episode where we're going to sort of tie a nice little bow on the season and wrap things up. And then after the Grey Cup game, we will bring you our last episode of the 2025 season where we will go through Argos free agents, who we think they should keep, who they need to re-sign, who they might consider letting go, areas of need in free agency. And then we go dark for a little while and come back in time for our free agency special, where we'll have you covered from start to finish as that excitement heats up and the 2026 season gets underway. So that is our programming for the next little while. I realize it's been several years since like the first year doing this that we ended the season this early. JB, let's get into these Argos Award nominees. No big surprises here. And for full transparency, I'm one of the 4 voting members of the committee that goes through these, along with Ryan Dinwiddie, who has a vote as the head coach of the Toronto Argonauts. And there seemed to be real consensus this year, not one of the more difficult, controversial seasons we've had. We started with most outstanding player. Nick Arbuckle was the Grey Cup most outstanding player from last season, played 15 games this year, ended up throwing for career highs in yards, touchdowns, 4,370 yards, 26 touchdowns, had an outstanding season statistically. Is there anyone we were missing here, JB? Is Nick Arbuckle a legitimate most outstanding player for the Toronto Argonauts?
Yeah, I think so. Obviously, I'm a fan of Hiro Lahu. I think that whatever his flaws were, football is a quarterback-driven game, and Arbuckle, definitely was a key factor in their wins and was a key factor in their almost wins. So I think you'd be hard-pressed to not suggest he wasn't their most outstanding player. Just statistics alone. Like the Argos were bottom 2 in almost every category this year. It was not a very good statistical year, except for passing yards. So there you go.
Yeah, if you told me preseason, like Arbuckle's going to have to play 15 games, but he'll end up with 4,370 yards and 26 touchdowns, I would have signed up for that. Now, I wouldn't have signed up for the Nick Harpel having to play 15 games in the beginning of the season, because that was not what we thought was going to happen, except for you, JB. You were probably the only one that was on this really early, where you were very skeptical as to whether or not we would see Chad Kelly. And so, yeah, tip of the cap to you for wondering if that might be the case. And you look at other teams around the league, and we've talked about this all season long, find another backup quarterback that would have played 15 games and put up those kinds of numbers. I'm not sure there is another one in the CFL, unless you count Cody Fajardo, who started the season on the bench. Maybe you can look at him. Most outstanding offensive lineman, this was unanimous. This is the easiest one, I think probably maybe the second easiest. It's got to be Peter Nicastro. It was Peter Nicastro. This is the second time he's earned this honor, 2021. He also was the nominee for most outstanding lineman. He was rock solid in a year where the offensive line struggled more than we've seen them struggle in 7-8 years. And he was the one constant every week. He was out there doing his job, and he wasn't even the starter to begin the season. Remember, he came off the bench in the season opener against Montreal. Darius Sirocco was the starting center. He got hurt, and Nicastro came in and was amazing all season long. I would actually put him up for the best center in the CFL this year. I think that's how good his play was, because he wasn't getting great guard play on either side all season long, and it kept shifting. The guys he was playing next to were constantly changing. JB, what did you think of Nicastro's season?
Yeah, sorry, I'm not always going to jump in. Yeah, I thought he was clearly the best offensive lineman. He was the most dependable. We've talked about it was a very up and down season. It's hard to put your finger on what happened there. I think probably just guys moving around, and the line is, to use kind of a sort of, I guess, weary metaphor or analogy, right? Like it is a fence, or it is a building. It is like a one unit, and when you're missing something, the whole thing falls apart. But I thought Nicastro played really well, and was clearly the best offensive lineman for Toronto. So yeah, it makes sense. It's, again, it shows that like there is stuff to build on. I'm certainly expecting a bounce back season from Hunter. There are. The line is not a total shambles, but it needs an injection of somebody who can really come in and lock down a tackle.
Yeah, agreed. And I think there are some possibilities there. We'll talk about that after Grey Cup when we kind of go through each positional group. But I think there's some interesting things there. You forget about like a Neem Dankwa, for example, and they're. Depending on what direction they go in terms of Americans and Canadians too, I think there's some fascinating possibilities. But no matter what, they're going to need to add somebody that isn't currently in the building, and for me to feel comfortable about that position group going forward. Most outstanding Canadian, Kevin Mittal. Kevin Mittal, second-year player. Had a huge milestone in the last game, reached the 100-catch mark, was the only Canadian in Argonauts history to have ever done that. There's only 5 Argos that have achieved that milestone all time. Ended up with 102 receptions, 886 yards, 4 touchdowns. All of those are career highs for him. And he has a legit shot at ending the season as the CFL's leader in receptions. He's 7 up on the next closest guy, and who knows what's going to happen this weekend with regards to who's getting the ball, what these games mean. It's all going to be set up by that Hamilton-Ottawa game to start things off. So who knows what we'll see stats-wise. I think there's a very good chance Mittal ends the season as the catch leader. Are you surprised by how good he was, considering he wasn't used that much last season?
No, I think we both felt like, especially from the Grey Cup, that that he flashed like there. He clearly is this really interesting combination of speed and power, and such an unusual kind of makeup for a wide receiver. He's not kind of the classic outside guy, or he's not sort of the classic slot guy. So he's a fascinating collection of traits, and he flashes. I think he's somebody who you need to game plan specifically for. I think that his skill set can really take advantage kind of in the American way, where you can have a tight end who's too big for linebackers and too fast for DBs. I'm not saying you should use him at tight end. Obviously, you probably wouldn't want to do that in Canadian football, but he is somebody I think you can mismatch. I think you can get real mismatches. So I hope, that the offensive plan next year will really try and use his unique skill set, because it's fascinating to me what he might be able to do if you're really using him at his peak.
Yeah, and if you combine, remember, under contract for next year, we'll get into this again in our post-Grey Cup episode, but Mittal, Coxie, Herslow, Polk, it's a pretty good place to start with those guys. And some of the creativity you talk about with Kevin Mittal that I think we're just starting to see get going. He reminds me there's a lot of young Dembski in him, or if you go down south looking like a Deebo Samuel kind of player that can do a little bit of everything. And I think that's a really exciting player to have when you've got good pieces around him that can challenge downfield, that can be good route runners over the middle, and you can kind of do what you want with Mittal. So I think this is very much deserved and really exciting going forward.
What would you set the over-under on number of conversations they had about using Mittal as a running back?
I'm sure it came up. He's built like a running back, right? If you see Kevin Mittal and you didn't know, and you said, what position do you think this guy plays? I think you probably say running back. He's built like it. He runs like a running back. He's got elite speed for a running back, and maybe there were some conversations. Remember, he was the quarterback sneak guy too. It's interesting, but he's a heck of a receiver.
Yeah, he's a great nominee. He's fantastic. I wouldn't even say going to be a star. I think, he was a star. Now the question is, where is that ceiling? Can he be a superstar? I think that's on the table.
Yeah, you're already a star. If you lead the CFL in receptions, you're a star.
Yeah, right. He's no longer a project.
Right. In his second year, Canadian receiver. I think that's awesome. Most outstanding defensive player of the year, Cameron Judge, and this was unanimous. Judge, remember, was acquired in a trade for Flo Remolade this offseason. 79 tackles, 4 defensive tackles, 3 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, 2 picks. Could have been probably 4 picks. I'm sure he still wakes up in the middle of the night thinking about a couple of those. 4 knockdowns and 6 tackles for a loss. Just an outstanding season for Cameron Judge. Didn't get to play next to a healthy Winton McManus all season long, which is kind of what we'd hoped going in, where you've got Winton as the highest paid linebacker in the league, and Judge, I think, came in as the 3rd highest paid linebacker in the league. As a Canadian starter as well, I think was huge. He ended up doing more than his own job. He was doing work for everyone else, and it's why he was at the top of the page in tackles every week. He was all over the field, and I don't think he was playing healthy for most of the season either. He took some shots. He was shaking injuries off from game 3 onwards. You just saw him laboring, and yet it never carried on to the field. You'd see it when he got off the field, but as soon as he crossed that line, he looked like Cameron Judge, like vintage Cameron Judge. Sorry, go on, Jamie.
I know you're always waiting.
Well, I'm waiting for you. This is a defensive player. You love Cameron Judge. Get in there.
Do I love Cameron Judge?
Yes.
Question mark. No, I don't think I do love Cameron Judge. I like Cameron Judge.
Okay.
I think I like Cameron Judge certainly more than I did the first time through. I thought he played well this season, and there were a couple of games where he played fantastic. I thought he was, I don't know. I thought he was fine. I didn't think that he, I'd love to see more consistency in terms of impact. But obviously, not having Winton changes that a great deal. I think he's a really nice complementary back. And so much like the D line, right? It is a tandem thing, and there is a connection there. So, I don't want to damn him with faint praise. I thought Cameron Judge had some fantastic games this year. I'll leave it at that.
Did you think there was someone else that was more deserving of Defensive Player of the Year?
No, I don't think so. I mean, Winton was banged up the whole season. I love Dark Angelo. He was certainly probably the most consistent, but I don't think I would give him the nod over Judge. Nobody on the defensive line consistently was, a threat. And, in the secondary, there were some highs and lows. I mean, they only won 5 times. So, like, it's not surprising that there isn't a long list of guys who delivered consistent, amazing defensive performances on a 5-win team.
For most outstanding special teams player, this was also unanimous, just like the Judge pick. Liram Hajrullahu, easy pick. He's set records. This was a historic season for Hajrullahu. So, first of all, his 57 field goals is an Argos record. That is pretty impressive in its own. That's where a lot of the Argos scoring came from. Not that they weren't scoring touchdowns, they were, but 57 field goals is a lot. Also, 12 field goals of 50 yards or more this season. That sets a CFL record. And he tied an Argos record with 18 consecutive field goals. And then the 208 points total is the second most in team history. So all of these things together, and then you combine that with the fact that not only is he kicking from distance, ends up with 89.1% of his field goals converted, is pretty impressive. And so this is a no-brainer to me that he would be the most outstanding special teams player of the year. And JB, you might have gone as far as most outstanding player.
Yeah, I mean, I was only maybe 25% tongue in cheek on that. He was fantastic. He was the most consistent Argo. He kept them in games. It is one of those things that you really miss when you don't have it. He, from distance, from point after, kickoff, he is an all-star. So it's nice to see him be celebrated.
And then for most outstanding rookie, this was another one that seemed easy to me, was Derek Sluka. Sluka was a receiver to start the season. Remember going back to last year and going into training camp, like it wasn't until we saw that we saw the inter-squad scrimmage. Remember, Sluka started off playing offense, switched over to D and had a pick and made one of the best defensive plays in the game. And from there, it was just like, maybe Sluka should just be on defense. And then there were a few injuries, guys banged up, he got his shot. And aren't the Argos lucky he did? And aren't they lucky that they kept him on defense, because he was outstanding. It started with the game in Ottawa, I think, was where he first drew national attention. He had that long scoop and score. He had the missed field goal return touchdown. And was a real bright spot when you're talking about, this, I don't know, this wasn't really a season of where a lot of rookies were highlighted, where you had a lot of new first year players who were like, wow, look at that guy. There were a couple. I think, we've talked a lot about Aaron Casey on this podcast, certainly. But Derek Sluka starting at safety and just being a constant there. And we saw a real difference when he wasn't on the field. He had to miss some time due to injury, and the secondary suffered because of it. It wasn't the best secondary the Argos have ever put together by any means, but I love seeing him come downhill as a run stopper. He was always the first guy to make it into the box if they got through to the second level. And I thought was a real threat back there. Love his speed, love his length. Very deserving from my perspective as the most outstanding rookie. Anyone else that you thought might have been on that list, JB?
No, I don't think so. I know we talked about a couple of guys who maybe like almost qualified to be a rookie, but I thought Sluka was great. I mean, that's an amazing performance. That's not an easy position to come in and be a rookie at. And I think that's a real find. He's clearly going to be a good special teamer, and he has a real nose for the ball. You can't teach that. He just, some guys have it. They just have it. They're a magnet to the ball, and so that's a terrific asset. And as he gets more experience and more reps and more sophisticated, in his coverage, he's clearly an elite athlete. So I'm really excited to see what he'll be able to do with with more experience and more coaching and more tape.
If you didn't get a chance to see it, you can go to the Argos YouTube page, and they've got all of the big interviews from Sunday. Guys are clearing out their lockers. It's end of season media availability day where the media talks to Coach Dinwiddie, Pinball Clemons, a lot of the veteran players. And if you haven't seen those yet, those videos are available to you. We're not going to replay those whole things and go through all of them because there's a lot of content there to sift through. And I do recommend you go listen. There's some really good interviews. I thought David Morisuti did a really nice job in terms of asking some questions that you probably were wondering as well. So it is worth checking that out on the Argos YouTube page. We want to highlight a little bit of what Coach Dinwiddie said, a little bit of what Pinball Clemons said. We've been asked to kind of translate some of the coach speak and go through maybe what Dinwiddie and Pinball meant with a few different things they went over. For Dinwiddie first, just to give you sort of the Cole's Nose version of what Dinwiddie said, one quote that really struck me was, he said something along the lines of, we didn't always play well, but the culture is still there. The guys work hard, they appreciate each other, they respect each other. That to me, I thought, when you have a 5-win team, that's not something that usually exists in the locker room. And I think that quote, while true, and I think they did have a really good locker room, I think you have to give a lot of credit to the coaching staff for that, and the team leaders. It's not just the coaches, it's also the guys like Wyndham McManus that are vocal leaders in the locker room. To be able to keep that together, like we said that with the second last game, when the second last game of the season that didn't matter, and there they were fighting right down to the end and almost coming away with the victory. Like, to me, that really showed that locker room culture that Coach Dinwiddie's talking about. So maybe of all of the lines, that one stood out to me most. But I'll give you some of the other things that he said in that interview, and then JB, maybe you can reflect on what you make of some of his comments. So first of all, he's pointed out Kevin Mittal is under contract for another year, mentioned that he would like to make Kevin Mittal at Argo for a long time. He addressed the O-line, said this is something they'll have to fix in the offseason. They have some issues. He mentioned wanting to find a consistent running back, which I thought was, yes, obvious in a way, but also interesting. He talked about the linebacking core being very good and having a lot of depth. He also talked about how he's got Arbuckle, Kelly, Daggy, Horn, Duggan all under contract right now. And he said if they brought all those guys back to camp, that he'd be pretty happy. And then when he was asked specifically about Wyndham McManus, he said you have to consider age, you got to consider availability. And then he sort of followed that up on the topic of veterans by saying that the team has to make sure they make the right decisions. They can't just go off emotion. And he ended by saying he loves everyone in the locker room, would love to have everybody back. But the CFL doesn't work that way. Professional football doesn't work that way. JB, what do you make of Dinwiddie's comments? And was there anything there that jumped out to you or made you raise a Spockian eyebrow?
No, I thought, maybe I was expecting a little too much. I'll be honest, a little behind the scenes here. You were very excited for me to watch the videos. I was less gripped by them, although I thought the questions were terrific. I thought I thought Dinwiddie, struck the exact correct tone. That this is not a dumpster fire. This is not a tear down. This is not an issue of we have people here who don't want to be here and, we need to make major changes. That it was a season that had some good players and a decent locker room vibe, but that there were some positions at offensive line and defensive line and running back that needed more talent. And I think he mentioned there were, a couple of guys that they might throw overboard, which makes sense. I don't think you want to bring a 5-win team back. Obviously some guys are going to have to go. There are going to be some people who you feel either are not the type of player you want in your locker room or are just not good enough at their job. So I think that makes sense that you're not going to, you're not going to be fake and be like, everybody's amazing. Obviously everybody's not amazing. You won 5 games. The Winton stuff probably is the closest to a Spockian eyebrow. It was positive, but not, rapturous. He did mention that the sort of classic coaching line about availability, right? That's the best ability is availability. And it's a tough business. It's professional sports. And hey, if you can't go 100% most of the season, that's going to really frustrate a coach and really frustrate a franchise. And it's not anybody's fault. An injury is an injury, but it's not a fair world. So I'm sure that there were frustrations at the salary to playing time, with Winton, and I think they would like to have Winton, but it felt like they were signaling a change in pay.
Yeah,
if he wanted to come back.
He is a free agent going to this offseason. That's such a tough one because we both know he is, when healthy, the best linebacker in the CFL, one of the best defensive players in the CFL. There's no question about that. When he's not healthy, he's still one of the better linebackers in the CFL. But his, being the highest paid linebacker in the CFL, there's an expectation that comes with that, and it's a lot of money to put in one position when you've already got so much going towards your quarterback on the other side of the ball. Like he said, they're going to have to go through this carefully, not with emotion. If you go through it with emotion, you re-sign Wyndham McManus and you say, yeah, he's an amazing team leader, he's an amazing player. If he has a healthy season, he's worth every penny of what he was paid this past year. But as you get older, and I went to now turning 31, I believe, it doesn't get easier. You're not less likely to get injured as you get older. And so I think that's a really important conversation they need to have, and probably the biggest one they need to have this offseason. Because again, there's no doubt about the player and his ability, but the availability, the cap space, and the fact that it's a very strong positional group that he mentioned. Like, we feel really good about Aaron Casey, about Isaac Darkangelo, about Cameron Judge. Like, there's a really nice core there of guys. But at the same time, you'd hate to see Wyndham McManus playing for somebody else because you know what he's capable of and you know how that would go. So I did think that was really interesting. What did you make of his running back comment? We have to find a consistent running back. Like, to me, that kind of suggests they need to find someone that isn't currently on the roster.
Yeah. I mean, you don't need to be like a tape grinder to draw the conclusion that the Argos with like 84 yards for the season might want to upgrade at the running back position. I mean, I appreciated the honesty. I like that. He wasn't sort of like, we're just one guy away or this or that. He was pretty honest that there were some positional areas of fairly significant deficiency. You have to have a running back. I mean, that's part of the offensive line troubles as well, of course. Like one of the key aspects of offensive line is that the other team doesn't know if you're running or passing. At least half of the time. It makes it incredibly hard to play offensive line. It's like playing poker with your cards backwards. It makes it, it's really hard when the other team knows that you're passing the whole time. So these guys are in these sets, and that's tough. Like, that is part of the reason for sure why the offensive line had such a tough season, is because there was, they just were not ever trying to run. So you have to have some ability to run the ball, and they're going to need to find somebody who can come in and be that. I mean, you're going to need somebody with, you can't just plug in anybody. I know the Argos were sort of floundering at running back for a couple of years before they struck gold, and this year they're kind of back to floundering. So hopefully they're able to find somebody, but it is much harder than one might think to try and find a good running back, surprisingly, despite there being hundreds or thousands of them. It does seem hard to find a running back who can deliver. I mean, even looking around the CFL, like, you don't tend to have guys pop up and dominate at running back. It's the same guys every year at the top of that list.
And this is where I sort of disagree philosophically. I think it's very easy to find a starting running back. I think you do that by having a good offensive line. And I think once you've got a good offensive line, you'll have a good running back.
Who is at the top of the running backs this year who was not there last year? Like who found a running back this year?
There wasn't a lot of discovery of running back. I guess Rankin kind of really made a name for himself this year. Like he had an amazing season and was an afterthought last season. He wasn't the guy like that.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, that's fair. I mean, he's kind of like he's sort of a multi-purpose. But I agree with you. So there it can be found, but I think it is harder to find than just like, well, we'll just bring this guy and it'll be okay. But
you also, and then guys like Butler, for example, does great in BC, goes to Hamilton, is terrible, goes back to BC, he's great. And it's because it's not, he didn't change. It's not like he forgot how to play running back in Hamilton. It's the offensive line wasn't the same. And so, like, to me, that's such a big difference. But, you know, I do want to give you credit for what I think is your best analogy you've ever had, or at least most amusing. I love your analogies. I laugh out loud at them a lot. Holding your poker cards backwards while playing poker, comparing that to the offensive line with the defense knowing if you're running or passing, I thought was fantastic. It is my favorite one since you compared McLeod Bethel Thompson to a nice pair of gloves.
Not a nice pair, an old pair of work gloves.
An old pair of work gloves. I think you
characterized my excitement at finding him on the roster.
Well, I think you said that Chad Kelly was a sports car. McLeod Bethel Thompson was was an old pair of work gloves that to do the job. That's fair. Let's move on to what Pinball had to say, which I think really what he wanted to remind everybody was that, and he wanted to be sure that this was a team message as well, is that this season is not the norm. He went through the last few seasons and reminded media there that the Argos had won 2 of the last 3 Grey Cups. They had been in 4 straight East finals coming into this year. And that is the norm, not the exception. That this year is the exception, not the norm. And he highlighted a couple of key injuries, which obviously we know about, but I think we forget about some of those. Like, he started going through some of this stuff, and I was kind of replaying the season in my head as I went back through, you know, for our next segment, trying to find sort of highs and lows of this season. And even me, who's around the team all the time, obviously covering every game, doing these podcasts twice a week, it still surprised me when I started adding up these names and the time missed, because he talked about guys that had missed like half the season or missed the whole season in some cases. We know Chad Kelly, that's been talked about a lot, but let's not forget that he's a huge chunk of the salary and a most outstanding player. You've got Wyndham McManus, who, yes, played 13 games, but he was injured all year. He got injured in camp and was never really, truly Wyndham McManus. And these are, I'm just going through award winners right now. You got Ryan Hunter, most outstanding offensive lineman from last season, who missed time, was hit by a car, was never quite what he was last year, was being asked to play a different position, and that impacted his play too. You had Darius Sirocco, former All-Star, who got the start at center over Peter Nicastro in week 1, got injured, and he was never the same for the rest of the season. Mackay Polk was in the NFL, only got a few games, never really got a chance to gel with Arbuckle, a guy that he didn't really get a chance to play with last year because it was sort of he and Kelly by the time Polk got going. It was Chad Kelly back in for the Argos. Mayan Williams looked like the real deal through 3 games. Then he suffered that brutal head injury in Ottawa. And think about how different the season might have gone with a healthy Chop Williams all season long. Then you had the 7 different Sam linebackers, including Kenneth George Jr., who really took over that spot in the Saskatchewan game and looked sensational, and then took that brutal and illegal hit to the knee, and that ended his season. And also in that game, I think that's when DeMarcus Christmas went down for the season. He was the best Argos defensive tackle at that point. Brian Cox Jr. went down earlier in the year. Another guy with an Achilles injury, missed the entire season. He was supposed to be a star, former All-Star at end. Then you lose your left tackle, George Moore, for half the season. Sage Dockstader at left guard has missed a ton of games. Dylan Giffen, who's supposed to be the capable backup at both guard spots, maybe fighting for a starting spot. Maybe he would have started over Dockstader, ends up being banged up all season long. Anim Dankwa, maybe the best tackle prospect on the entire roster, played one half of football and went out for the season with a knee injury. You got Tavares Daniels, who missed half the season, former All-Star. DeMonte Coxey, again, missed half the season. He was the leading receiver in the CFL when he was injured, and he missed half the season. So you got your starting quarterback, starting running back, starting X, starting W, starting left tackle, starting right tackle, center, your starting defensive tackle, starting defensive end, your starting Sam, who have all missed half a season or more. It's funny that it took Pinball to kind of remind me of that, but just the magnitude of those injuries it's absurd. It's absurd. And that's why, JB, this isn't a total rebuild, a total overhaul, because a lot of those pieces you've got under contract, and a lot of them you hope will be healthy to start next season.
Yeah, I mean, we've mentioned that. I mean, I did find it a little unusual, like they were kind of making that case, because I can't really imagine who followed the team who maybe didn't think that. But I mean, I agree with them. I think that there's, they were gutted by injuries, and were not able to bring in players, and they were missing their starting quarterback. And I guess the fear is certainly Toronto has gone through some phases where they were sort of an also-ran and not very good, and they wanted to make clear that this was not kind of a return to the dark days.
That's the thing with like the Argos historically, like going back through the last 20 years, prior to the coach Dinwiddie / John Murphy, Michael Pinball Clemons era, it had been like great season, horrible season, great season, horrible season. Some of those Grey Cup wins came out of really mediocre seasons. And since this regime took over, this sort of Dinwiddie, Murphy, Pinball era, it has been nothing but winning. And then this year is different. And I think, probably, I think it's probably important to not just, to remind yourself and to remind everyone within the organization, like, this is not us, and this can't happen again next year. And we're going to start fixing this today. And I think that's the message that Pinball sent. JB, let's go through our highs and lows for this season. So we came up with 3 low points of the season. That wasn't easy. There were a lot of them. And then 3 high points of the season. I think we'll start with the lows first, because I don't want to end with them. There were many possible runners up, but we're just going to go right to number 3. Number 3 low of the season. This was week 10. It was a game the Argos absolutely needed to win and felt very good about, hosting the Ottawa Red Blacks. And they dropped the game 46-42. You put up 42 points against the Ottawa Red Blacks at home. You absolutely have to win that game, but they let Drew Brown throw for 5 touchdowns, and the Red Blacks came away with a 46-42 win. JB, this was a devastating moment in the Argos season.
Yeah, I mean, obviously losing to that team is terrible. It was a real wheels come off game. Where I think it's one of those games where you're really like, whoa, there are some structural problems in our ship here. So it was, it was quite a, like impactful game, because it really was. I think when I watched that game, I was like, okay, there are, this team is not built for this.
Yeah, and the offense couldn't have done more, right? Like, you put up 42 points against a 4-win football team. You've got to win that 10 out of 10 times. Like, it's inexcusable, and that was just such a gut punch at that point in the year. They needed that win so badly, and they didn't come away with it. The only bright spot they had from the game was that the point differential meant that split with Ottawa was Toronto's tiebreaker. Although now, going to the last week of the season, you kind of wish you didn't have that tiebreaker, because Ottawa can win this week, tying Toronto, and because of that tiebreaker, Ottawa's still picking first overall in the CFL draft. So that tiebreaker might come back to bite them. Our second lowest moment of the 2025 season, go all the way back to week 3, and the heartbreaking loss to Saskatchewan on the kickoff return touchdown. So to set that back up again, With 23 seconds left in the game, Arbuckle hit Kevin Mittal for a touchdown, hit Dejan Brissett for the 2-point conversion, and the place was going wild. The BMO Field has perhaps never been louder. It was amazing. The atmosphere was amazing, and everybody was like, well, here we go, overtime coming up. And instead, it's Mary Alford with a 99-yard kickoff return touchdown for the win. And the place just went dead silent. And that was, I don't even want to say the beginning of things to come, because like week 1 felt a little bit like that in some ways. Week 2 felt like it was just not it was a season of so many really unfortunate finishes to games. But I think that might have been the worst one.
Yeah, that was, well, it was terrible. Although, looking back at that game, like they really had no business winning that game. Although it would have been fun to win. So I didn't find the kick return as gutting, because it felt like they were sort of tiptoeing past the tombstones, on that game. But yeah, I mean, I mean, obviously it's frustrating. Also, there was a missed block in the back call, as there almost always is on a touchdown return, which was equally frustrating. But yeah,
and don't forget the Argos had one less guy on the field for that return touchdown right. Too, right?
Like not having 12 guys on the field. I mean, look, it's I have said this to teams. It's not by accident that bad teams make those mistakes. These are not unrelated facts. Like, bad teams don't just have bad luck all the time. The discipline, the focus, the ability to not make mistakes in key moments is what determines whether you're a winning team or not. And that's a real skill, and it was not something this team possessed.
The number one lowest moment of the season for us goes back to week 7 in Montreal. Toronto is winning 25-7 over the Alouettes and Davis Alexander. And there are 13 seconds left in the third quarter. 25-7 Argos at that point. Everything went south from that play onwards. The Argos end up losing 26-25. And of all luck too, like Davis Alexander ends up hurting himself like on the last play of the game, came back just in time to play the Argos, gets hurt again. The Argos, of course, probably win that game easily without Davis Alexander, but it was one of those things, and Neem Dankwa goes down in that game. There was so much that went wrong in that fourth quarter, and that was a real opportunity, not only to keep the tiebreak alive with Montreal, which would have been big going down the stretch, but that win was just so badly needed at that stage in the season. And to get a win in Montreal and to hand Davis Alexander his first loss as an Alouette would have been so big for this team. And, a little bit like week 1 when they couldn't get it done there when they opened the season, this one was even more gut-wrenching because a 25-7 lead was blown.
Yeah, also, I was sitting on the couch beside my father in Halifax, a lifelong Alouettes fan. So, yeah, it was definitely a low point of the season.
Yeah. Let's get into the highs, because I think we need that right now. We'll start with number 3. Number 3 was the 31-30 win over the Edmonton Elks. This was the third win in a row for Toronto. You think about that, like this 5-win team that just got hot in September. Daigie came in for Arbuckle and led the Argos on an 8-play drive in the last minute of the game for a clutch field goal from Hairolahu to be able to win that game 31-30. Yes, it's the Edmonton Elks. But that was so big, and you remember the reaction of everybody. Remember Dinwiddie high kicking down the sideline, and Daigie celebrating and flexing in front of the Elks bench, and just the place going nuts. It was such a huge moment because at that point in the season, it felt like at that moment after that game, that win, it felt like the Argos are back. Like, remember Dinwiddie's postseason comments were something along the lines of hope the Elks enjoy the off season, because it felt like at that point the Argos were heading towards a playoff spot and the Elks were heading down. Now the Elks did end up missing the playoffs, But it really felt like Toronto was a team headed in a different direction with their third straight win at that point. So that win was maybe as an emotional win as there was all offseason. There's only 5 to choose from, but that one was pretty emotional because it was personal.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was. I mean, I will say this about their 5 wins: they were never boring.
That's true. Maybe the most boring of the 5 wins would be our number 2, but it still doesn't qualify as a boring game. Our number 2 high of the year, the C&E game against Nathan Rourke and the BC Lions, and Toronto just annihilated them. That to me was a real moment. 52-34 over the BC Lions, and the fact that it's the C&E game, so you get all the extra crowd and fan base in there. To me, that was a real high point. It wasn't a dramatic game. It wasn't one of those that came down to the wire that so many of the other ones did. But Nick Arbuckle passed for 443 yards, 3 touchdowns. Brown ran for 85 yards and a touchdown. Like, they basically, to have 100 yards rushing in that game, 443 yards passing. It was bananas, and stood out as maybe the only time all season where Toronto looked like one of the best teams in the league. They looked unbeatable on that day, the way they played against Rourke and the BC Lions in front of a huge crowd. And that's the key, because there have been so many times for Toronto sports teams in years past where you've got the building packed and it's not the game you wish it could have been.
It was, it was a weird kind of run where they really looked like they were going to really make a push to be part of the playoff conversation.
And then our number 1 high of the season, you know what it is by now. It's the Labor Day victory in Hamilton. And this was such an epic win. The only thing that would have made this better is if this had somehow knocked Hamilton out of the playoffs by a game and put Toronto in the playoffs by the game. Unfortunately, that wasn't the result. But this win on its own was spectacular because it felt like all was lost. Remember, in the dying seconds of that game, Bo Levi Mitchell led the Ticats down the field. They were picking on Willie Drew. Kenny Lawler came to life and got the touchdown with just seconds remaining. And Arbuckle just launched one up in the air to Dejon Brissett, who not only caught it in double coverage, both defenders bounced off of him like physics balls, and he turned down the sideline, dove for the end zone, and we weren't sure how that one was going to end because the clock showed 0. He hit the pylon with his football, but we also felt pretty confident he'd stepped out at the 3. They had to review the play. They decided he did step out at the 3, but there was 0.7 seconds left on the clock or whatever it was. And so they were able to go out and kick the game-winning field goal. It couldn't have looked more over. That game looked done. And in front of that huge crowd in Hamilton on Labor Day, who were celebrating, who had left the stadium twice. Hamilton fans left the stadium earlier in the game when it looked like the Argos were running away with in the fourth quarter. And then left again celebrating after the Bo Levi Mitchell to Kenny Lawler touchdown with only like 9 seconds remaining, and to then have Brissett do that and Hairelahu cap it off was pretty epic as a Toronto Argonaut win over their rivals down the QEW.
I mean, it was a really fun day, and it's always nice to win on Labor Day. It was almost disaster to exciting finish. It's one of those reasons why I think there's, they feel some optimism and we feel some optimism about the team. I'm certainly more optimistic about Toronto finishing first next year than I am Ottawa, even though they're beside each other in the standings.
Speaking of optimism, JB, it is time for Put Me Down for 20. This is our final Put Me Down for 20 of the season, and it is not going well. We are both in slumps. I was 2-0 last week. You put all 20 fleeces on the Argos to win. That obviously did not work out well. No. I'm down to 214 in jeopardy of finishing below 200 for the first time. And it's all. I'm putting it all on the line this week with one play. JB, you're down to 109.5 golden fleeces, but
Oh my God.
you haven't had to go to the bank, so obviously that's good. JB, your streak, you have lost 11 straight, which is ridiculous,
madness.
But this is the week to make it all back up. This is our final put me down for 20 of the season. So I will start things off and I'll pass it over to you. I'm putting all 20 of my fleeces on a parlay. I've got Edmonton on the money line, combining it with Saskatchewan plus 7.5, and that pays out at plus 266. So if I lose that, I will be below my original 200 for the first time since we started playing this 3 years ago. JB, you've not had to go to the bank. You've got plenty of fleeces to be able to make a comfortable wager. What are your wagers this week?
Great question. I have I need something to go for me here. I have Calgary winning by 14 or more. I'm sort of counting on Edmonton being 3-2-1 Cancun. So I have Calgary at plus 240 to win by 14. And God love them, I'm gonna go with the Red Blacks. They have nothing to play for. But spoiler, I think sometimes that can be a great motivation if the team isn't completely adrift to come in and ruin Hamilton nights in Hamilton. It would be very Hamilton to spill their dinner all over themselves on Friday night. So I'm going to go Ottawa plus 640 to take the win in Hamilton.
A very wise man back in week 2 said, I am never betting on the all caps ever again.
I know, but all rules are out the window now in my current loss streak.
And a reminder, not that you need it, do not take any of our bets seriously. Certainly don't bet any of your hard-earned money on what we play. You'd be far better off probably betting the opposite. Only ever bet what you're happy to lose as the cost of entertainment if you are going to gamble on sports. Let's get into our final challenge flag of the season. You had a win last week, JB. You're playing for pride at this point, but you have an opportunity this week to make it a one-score game. I had to come one short. So last week you went 3-1, and you are now 42-35 overall in the season. And I am up 11-9 in our challenge flag. So this one you can make it 11-10, or it can be 12-9 to end the season. Let's go through your picks this week, and I'll tell you which one I'm going to challenge. So it opens up with Ottawa at Hamilton.
Well, I'm going to obviously it's my final week to try and hedge, so I'm going to take Hamilton at home.
And then that could dictate some of your other picks. The thing is here, this could cascade badly. If that one is wrong, if Ottawa wins, first of all, you'll have a lot of golden fleeces to celebrate with, but there'll be a ripple effect for the rest of the games here. So second game is Calgary at Edmonton. It doesn't matter for Edmonton. It does matter for Calgary. You've already taken them minus 14. Are you going to hedge and take the Elks?
No, I got Calgary here.
And then Montreal at Winnipeg. If Ottawa beats Hamilton, Montreal can take the division with a win there. We have to wait to see how that will work out. And it does matter to Winnipeg. Are you just going to assume Hamilton has won and that Montreal is going to start nobody?
That's a great question. I like Winnipeg there no matter what. I think Winnipeg wins at home.
Well, they took a lot to get past Jake Mayer and the backup Saskatchewan Roughriders last week at home, but you never know. And then lastly, the last game of the regular season, BC at Saskatchewan. Saskatchewan's got nothing to play for. BC could finish kind of all over the place.
It's an interesting one. I mean, if I were Saskatchewan, I'd be quite keen to put a dagger in BC. They're kind of a bit of a wild card team where they don't scare you, but if they roll the right, sort of dice, they can be a handful. So it's interesting what Saskatchewan's take on that would be. I would be very tempted to put a dagger in them, but I don't think they will. I think BC wins.
The reason I think you might get a really good game out of the Rough Riders this week is that they've got a bye. And they rested guys last week. They had a few guys out last week, Trevor Harris among them. You've got a bye week coming up next week. I don't know that you want to go...
Yeah, it's interesting.
3 weeks in a row. 3 weeks. Yeah, like that's a lot for a team that hasn't really been themselves for a while anyway. Like I think the last time they played a really good game was the Labor Day game against Winnipeg. That's the last time they looked like the Saskatchewan Roughriders that we see in the standings in terms of wins and losses. So that's a weird one. It is
hard though. Yeah, but it's hard. Like it's one thing to be a spoiler, but it is hard to win a game that you don't have to win.
Yeah. Like,
you just can't trick yourself. It's not like being a spoiler, and it's not like you need the win. I just feel like BC needs the win, and I just don't think Saskatchewan will be able to work up the froth to get there. But we'll see.
Ottawa Hamilton's Friday night at 7:00. Calgary Edmonton Friday night at 9:30. Montreal at Winnipeg Saturday at 3, and then BC at Saskatchewan closes it out Saturday at 7:00. Enjoy the games, enjoy the playoffs. We will be back to you after the Grey Cup to bring you our full review of the free agent list that Toronto's got heading into the offseason, who they should keep, who they should re-sign, and of course, our Xs and Argos awards that we've been doing now for several seasons and mean absolutely nothing, but we love doing it nevertheless. All that and more will come up on your very final episode of the 2025 season. That'll just about do it for us on this bi-week episode of the Xs and Argos podcast. For JB, this is Ben Grant saying so long, and may all your pre-snap reads be good ones. I'll see ya.
Together fight the foe, foe, foe.